we want to constantly say, well, our system is broken. No, the fuck it's not.
It's
It
working
fully
as
functioning
designed.
as it was
working
intended
as designed.
to work. That's exactly what it's doing.
It's been 57 years since they had any kind of meaningful police reform. Just think for a second, Maverick, about all the unarmed black people, people of color, who have been killed unjustly by police in 57 years. And yet, America still hasn't saw fit to try to correct this in any way.
The fact that the George Floyd Policing Act hasn't been passed, that's a problem. Because it's blood on that bill. You go to Breonna Taylor with the no-knock warrant, she was killed because of that. If they would have had that law put in place, she would still be alive. And I wouldn't have to hear from her mom being sad. Her family is hurt. You can go to Eric Garner and my brother, the no chokehold law. They should still be here. There's no reason that my brother should have died in broad daylight. There's no reason.
Chief, for you, obviously there's a lot of opposition against this bill.
I'm the president of the Major State Chiefs, right, which is 70 largest police departments in the country, 9 largest in Canada, and we do support the reform. That qualified immunity has to be addressed. Now, should it be completely eliminated? Probably not, and I think that's going to be the position. It's going to be very difficult to get it done, but it definitely has to be.
We've never been this close in our lifetime in the United States Senate to getting a bill on the floor that will reform qualified immunity, because that is the issue. All the police have to say, Chief, is, I felt in fear, I felt threatened, and the judge can say, well, you weren't there now, were you? You can't second guess this officer.
I've probably been beaten by police 3-4 times, and I come in the house, bruised up face. My mom say, what happened to your face? She go right to the police station and file an internal affairs report. And when I turned 18 and got locked up for a gun, once I caught a case, they brought those same internal affairs statements back in court and basically used them against me. Like, you know, I'm an 18-year-old kid. I got lawyers, DAs, detectives, and stuff like that. They playing the game. I came to make a statement.
Let me make it plain, as they say in the black church. Y'all know over 90% of the time when unarmed black people are killed, they never get to see a courtroom because qualified immunity. It still comes back to implicit bias, because worse is how they kill young black people in courtrooms every day in America.
The bill is about, you know, no-knock warrants, getting rid of them, banning chokeholds. What do you think specifically would work and would not work?
Well, look, I think, first of all, don't knock warrants. Unless it's a hostage rescue situation, we need to get rid of them. And like I tell my cops, if it's a dope case, and they're gonna be able to get rid of the dope that fast, you didn't have much of a case to begin with.
Exactly.
So you ain't taking down Al Capone.
You ain't taking down the
Chief, I think about Breonna Taylor. We were astonished to find out that the no-knock warrants in the state of Kentucky, it was over 80% against black people. Mm-hmm. They weren't busting in white people's houses. When a chief sees, hey man, we only executing chokeholds against black men. Mm-hmm. What do you do?
Chokeholds, unless you're in a fight for your life, because I do have to push back just a little bit. It's not about whether somebody's armed or not, it's about the totality of the circumstances. Because I've had a couple of shootings in my career where the officer was truly in a fight, where sadly somebody lost their lives. So we have to look at the totality of the circumstances. But when somebody's running away.
How many black men got to get shot in the back before you say, hold on, why were you in fear when the black man was running away from you? The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, we're not denying police officers their due process and their day in court. All we're saying is the families of those black people, they'll get their day in court too.
And Philonise, for you, how are you feeling a year later, and also for this bill to pass? What would it mean to you and to your family?
To me, it'll be special because I think about all the young black African-American kids that I'm growing up around. And in the society that I live in, every day you see something happening to somebody. I lost like 2 or 3 friends probably in the last month, and nobody knows how they died. People all around the world, they all deserve to be here. We shouldn't have to live in places that we're scared to go outside, because even though a police officer is the law, he's not above the law. So everybody who lives in this country should be able to walk and be free. We went to Washington, and we had the opportunity to just speak with different officials, to me, that was major because I felt like they were listening. But for the law not to be passed yet, we're having problems. Me personally, if you can make federal laws to protect the bird, you can make federal laws to protect people of color. I don't have to know you to understand that your life matters.
And Jemele, obviously you're in the media, very prominent voice. People were galvanized last summer, and how do we keep trying to get people back into it?
Well, it depends on what people you're talking about, right? In our community, I think this is always toward the top of our list. What you do see is where I think it was something like 60% of the country were in support of Black Lives Matter last summer. That has dipped considerably since then. And so my concern is that with the rise of general white nationalism and white supremacy, even looking at the police force, looking at our military, there's very clearly a white supremacist problem in those particular branches. And so, as always, I think the reason why there's just been a holding pattern with racism in this country is that white people have to care. We can't be the only ones who want to see this problem eradicated. And unfortunately, the people who are most victimized, the people who are most oppressed by it, are the ones then tasked with solving it. And that's not right. And that's why this system can only go so far. At some point, you know, you talk about reaching across the aisle, Attorney Crump, that other side of the aisle, they need to reach back. And right now, we know what the problem is in the Senate, is that there's a lack of support for it, and we need to name it what it is. And so my question to them is, why isn't this more important to you? Why does it take somebody white, a white kid, being killed by the police for you to care about this? You should not want a police force that doesn't have any accountability. We can't have these institutions. And so that is where sometimes I get frustrated, because I don't feel like that same energy is there on both sides.
Taking down statues, wearing Black Lives Matters t-shirts, putting shit on the floor, like, that's all crumbs. We want the whole meal. A meal is passing laws, is passing this bill, is putting in real legislation that can change our country. So you asked the question, what could this bill mean? It could change the trajectory of this country completely.
And let me just quickly speak to something, because we brought up the media. My utter disappointment in the media is how we have continued to wrongly frame these conversations. We were talking about police reports. I remember coming up as a journalist, we were told like the police reports were gospel. Like whatever was in that report, that's what you believed. And that the officer's word was above everything else. And so sometimes when these cases happen, we don't do a good job of asking the right questions or getting to the root of the truth and the accountability. Hence why people feel like the only people who bad things happen to by the police are people who deserved it. And that's how the media sometimes frames these conversations. And that's why sometimes we can't sustain the momentum of everybody still having that same fire from last summer to want to see some real and meaningful change. And unfortunately, racism in this country, for a lot of people, still a little too profitable.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Natasha, last summer, you obviously discovered how powerful your voice was. Going through that and feeling it, did you learn something about yourself and what it means to have a voice like you do?
Just understanding my platform, understanding that God gave me this platform and intended it much more than to bring championships to the city of DC. I have an opportunity to be a voice for the voiceless. I have an opportunity to take on that role for my community and make this much bigger than myself in the game of basketball. Because at the end of the day, when we take those jerseys off, we're Black men and women out here in America. And because of that, our lives are always at a threat. I can be George Floyd. I can be Breonna Taylor just simply by being in my home or being out. And so, like you said, I don't need to know them to know that trauma. Being Black in America, you understand that trauma. You live it every single day. But it does fall upon our white counterparts to step up. Understand how much momentum is behind this movement right now that has never been. We need to capitalize on it, because this moment will go and people will continue to live their lives. White people will continue to go on and live their lives and not have to fear what we fear. But as Black Americans, we're still going to struggle with this a year later.
As a young Black man still, even though you're famous, like, you still have that thing in your head, I'm sure, being afraid of run-ins with the police and things.
Yeah, like we got our own, like I had like my own survival tactics coming up, because I grew up in this. So like if I get pulled over and like a cop from another race is like extremely hostile, I don't even know if I could leave it in his hands. Like from what I seen, if you see a white man choke a Black man out on TV, and of course that ain't the first time I seen that happen, but when you see that as a young Black man, you don't know what you're gonna do in that situation. I don't know if I wanna call for the supervisor or the captain to wait to see if this guy that's screaming at me with a gun in his hand is gonna take my life from me, you know, that's always been my life because I grew up in kind of like a ruthless environment. You gotta think you 18 years old, you gotta carry a gun. I don't wanna carry a gun. Guns heavy, guns hurt people. But the data says if you from 14 to age 23, you got like an 80% chance of being killed out here. So, you know, I just went with what was smart and carried the firearm. I always knew that I could do time for a firearm, but I don't think I could do the graveyard, so.
There's a whole conversation about police officers now in these environments, in our neighborhoods, policing us, but they don't come from the same place we come from. How do you guys as police officers, and specifically you as the chief, help officers to police them in a way that you can get on the same page if you can at all?
And that's a great question. I mean, first of all, you got to do a great job of trying to recruit people from those neighborhoods. One of the things I'm talking about right now to our members of Congress and to the White House is we used to have the Cop Next Door program back in the 80s, where they'd take HUD foreclosures and sell them to police officers at half the cost, but they had to live in the neighborhood. Getting people that are culturally competent, getting people out of their cars, getting people to react, to talk to people outside of that 911 call loop, to introduce each other. My cops are gonna be required to get the heck out of the police car and go shoot the breeze with people. Just say hi. So when they see you coming, they don't assume it's just because somebody called the cops. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it starts with getting rid of the school to prison pipeline in this country, where you look at this disproportionality of the way kids are treated depending on the socioeconomics and where they live. So that unless we address the socioeconomics, the education, the public health, the mental health.
I think we all want the same thing.
Of course.
But I think it's just been messaged so differently that you feel like equality is something that if we get equality, then you have none.
Right.
It's not like that. It's not an equation where it runs out.
Are you seeing progress? What are you feeling as we wrap up?
We all gotta just pay attention. And right now, the world is just half and half and it's split. We have to get together and do the things that we need to do to make this country right if nobody else is gonna do it. We always gotta remember it's always gonna be love over hate, friend over foe, equality over division.